This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
On KTN continues with us this morning. All right. So joining us in the Situation Room this morning around a number of conversations that we will be having around the cooperation or the partnership between continents, binding continents, Germany and Kenya in culture, work and development. His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Kenya is Ambassador Sebastian Groth. He joins us this morning. Good morning, Waziri.
Good morning, Waziri.
Balozi.
Oh, that's a promotion.
Balozi. We'll say both.
Thank you very much.
Balozi, good morning. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Good to have you again here.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, even if it's a bit cold in your studio.
I know. It's the ice age in here sometimes. But you know what? Conversations remain fresh.
Oh, okay, good.
And just speaking about that, so how are things so far? Are you still enjoying Kenya?
Oh, very much so. I just come back from Europe. I stayed there for 4 days in Portugal for a conference, and then we had our ambassadors conference in Berlin. And I can assure you, Europe is also very fine, especially I like the Mediterranean region very much, but also Berlin is a fantastic city. But when I boarded the plane, I was also ready to come back, Nyumbani to Kenya.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, guten Morgen.
Oh, guten Morgen. Habari asubuhi.
There you go. So we can go sharing it. Well, speaking about language and culture and people, we'd love to share today's proverb with you. And this week's proverbs have come out of the Benin Republic. The Beninois, a very interesting mix of cultures, because we're looking at a little bit of a mix between Francophone and Anglophone West Africa. Of course, colonized to a great extent by the French, but then steeped deep in culture from the Dahomey Kingdom, whereby things in terms of governance and culture were very big on the agenda for the kingdom. And there was a lot of transcontinental trade, and this was one of the seats of it. Very little of that kingdom is left today, but it's still steeped very deeply in culture. And the capital being Cotonou borders Nigeria, and it also borders Togo. In the north, it borders Niger and Burkina Faso. So you can already start to see what kind of a mixture and a melting pot that is. There had some very interesting proverbs. And this one today, we'd love to get your interpretation of it. The green snake says, watching a person is better than biting. Watching a person is better than biting.
Well, I would say that's a cautious approach in interaction, probably a very diplomatic one. Normally in diplomacy, of course, you observe also a lot, and you intervene only if really necessary, and you never bite. Normally. So in this respect, diplomats are like the green snake in Benin. But I think also green snakes might be quite poisonous. So probably the snake knows about the consequences of her actions. And in this regard, takes a little bit of the distance of the last sort of escalation means, you know.
So you can observe and watch and see. And if a thing is going to go into destruction, you might want to let it. Sometimes.
That is your interpretation of my interpretation.
That's my interpretation of your interpretation.
Both of you are right. Both of you are right.
Exactly. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think it's great that we can do that. Take things from a time gone by and make them applicable to current situations.
True. And part of this kingdom of Benin is now kingdom of your country, isn't it?
Exactly.
Part of your country.
Yes.
Yeah, it's part of Nigeria.
It is, actually. It's just interesting to see how that still plays out.
True.
And we still have traditional leaders that were entrenched in that original Dahomey kingdom. The Oba of Benin is still very much there. Yeah.
Do you know the story about the Benin bronzes?
Yes, the ones that have been taken to Europe and that you have refused to give back.
No, not we have not refused. In fact, we gave some back already.
Yeah.
But actually now the problem starts on the ground between a number of actors that are in charge, of taking care of them and also constructing museums. But we had 2 ministers from Germany 2 years ago who brought some of these bronzes back. And they are interacting very much with the Oba and also with the Nigerian authorities in Abuja. So it was a very important project in the bilateral relations.
Do you think we'll get them back?
You got them back already.
The other ones?
I don't know about the numbers actually, but some of them are already transported back. And it's not, I don't know, I mean, it's more than 1,000 all in all, as far as I know. And not all of them are in Germany. Some of them are in other countries.
Some of them are in the UK.
But we are very willing to return them, and then the negotiations or the talks are ongoing.
I love it.
And as I said, some are already back.
Yes. And I must say that it's a good thing that those actually find their way back to their origin. It's it is justice. And there is a lot of conversation between Germany and the African continent. And for purposes of where we are currently domiciled, that's Kenya, that camaraderie has continued. And before we even start to get into the what, we are trained as journalists to ask the four W's and an H. So why is there that camaraderie between Germany and Kenya?
Well, we as diplomats, we are trained never answer the questions of a journalist. But I will try my best to do this. What was the question?
So, that's very diplomatic, Balozi. But, so the friendship continues, and quite solidly so, between Germany and Kenya. What's the reason? Because usually, again, diplomatically, you say, unless there is an interest in something, for friendships to continue, then that's really not necessary. But unless there's an interest on both sides to be achieved, then there's always need for that friendship to continue. So what is that?
Well, first of all, I think historically it is a fact that Germany was the first country that recognized the independence of Kenya in December 1963. That's why I have the number plate 1CD on my car. But since then, there was a number of exchanges of high-level visits, of common projects, and also a lot of development cooperation here in this country. And then in the 60s and 70s, also tourism started. So some of the big hotels at the coast are owned or managed or run by Germans. And a lot of German tourists came, and still we are one of the biggest numbers in Kenya, 5th or 6th biggest number of tourists. And all the people that have visited the country once fell in love with it. And it is the same for my friends, our friends that visited us here, some of them for the first time in Africa, and some of them are coming back now for the third time because they say, as long as you are here, we have to benefit to visit you, but also to see the country. But I also think there is something in common from the sort of psychogram of the people. It's a good match between the characteristics, I think, of a German and of a Kenyan. And some things are similar, and some things are very complementary. Kenyans are very outgoing, very friendly, and also very funny. Sometimes the reputation, at least, is Germans are not so funny, but I think that's probably not true. But I think whenever I see also interaction between, let's say, a Kenyan waiter in a Mombasa hotel and a German tourist, I see that there is a special connection, a special relationship going on that goes beyond the pure client and waiter relationship. So I think there's really a human connection also. And on the political field, there's hardly any other country in Africa with whom we interact on so many levels, be it on the bilateral level, with a number of, as I said, development cooperation projects, but also with a number of NGOs that are present here, a number of scientific and cultural and sports cooperation. but also in the region, given that Kenya is playing a very, very important role in all the conflicts in the Horn of Africa as a mediating force, and we are supporting Kenya in this important work, but also on the multilateral level. We are in a situation where multilateralism is under pressure, is under threat, and we feel that countries like Germany and Kenya that are not superpowers, but that play a very, very important role in their respective regions, do their best to preserve and develop multilateralism so that it functions and serves the interests of the people, which is peace and stability and economic prosperity.
Well, I think that lays a foundation to help now Kenyans understand why is this cooperation, this bilateral relation very important for both Kenya and Germany, and what should we be looking forward to? Because, for a long time, and I want to believe you know this, every foreign intervention or bilateral relation is frowned at by Kenyans because we're speaking about Kenya, or by most African countries, because there is a power imbalance mostly. You just speaking about some historical injustices, about the historical artifacts that are beginning to find their ways back to Africa. And now, as earlier on you mentioned about escalation, the world is becoming a global village and people are seeking to expand. We've been struggling as an African country to see beyond the diplomatic initial phase of interaction with other continental players or international players. What follows are programs that sometimes, and we'll be talking about labor and resources movement both ways. What follows is mostly a disadvantage outcome for the recipients, in this case the Kenyan. So would we feel comfortable as Kenyans to embrace the relation that we're continuing to build with Germany, given the historical interaction between Africa and largely, there's this, the Berlin Conference, the 1953. That's what
85.
comes to 85. That's what comes to most Africans when you hear Germany is coming back to Africa. What do you think about that?
No, I think first of all, it's worthwhile to discuss this, this mutual perception also. But I think honestly that this is not the approach that Germany is applying towards its foreign policy with regard to Africa. What we are striving for is a partnership on eye level, where we both pursue our genuine political interests along a joint agenda, because there's so much overlap and complementarity that I don't see this question of who is more powerful or who is more dominant as the structural factor in this relationship. I give you a few examples. For example, Kenya is a leader in climate and energy policy. We just had the second African Climate Summit in Addis Ababa. The first one happened here in Kenya 2 years ago. From the very beginning, Germany supported this idea of more African agency, of a unified African voice in the international negotiations, because we feel not only Kenya, but a big number of African countries as partners of ourselves in the international negotiations that are also becoming more and more difficult. And so we have an interest to be ambitious, both in the fields of mitigation and adaptation, in the reform of the international financial system, in the sharing of technologies, in the development of clean energies, in the transition of our energetic systems in our economies. So this is an absolute convergence of our interests and not a question of who is more powerful or who is not more powerful. I think the general question behind your question is really the one about the African agency. So what is the role of Africa in all these global discussions that we are just having right now, be it about the future of multilateralism, peace and stability, the sustainability of the international financial system, the global trade system, for example. And in this regard, I think there was a lot of progress in the last 20, 25 years, also due to the African Union, but there is still a long way to go because also within Africa, the interests are not always aligned. You have countries that produce a lot of fossils for example.
Yes.
You have other countries that suffer a lot from the consequences of climate change. Just look to Somalia, for example, but also your own country, Kenya. You have countries that are a little bit in between, that do both, that have a little bit of fossil, but that also try to transit. You have countries that live because they have a lot of resources in their soil, and you have others like Kenya that more do agriculture and service industries. So it's very natural that the countries then pursue their own, your own interests. But what is important is that by the end of the day, the African voice is articulated and is heard. Yeah. And I think the African Climate Summit in this regard is a very, very good example. And we're also preparing the high-level week in New York, the General Assembly week, where more than 150 heads of state and government will be present, including, as I know, President Ruto. And this is also a good opportunity to raise the African voice, because we are talking for years now about a reform of the United Nations Security Council, which is the most important forum to preserve peace and stability. And
it depends who says.
Yeah, I mean, let's say the influence is they have to fight for their influence and for their role. But still, for us, Germany, we made some proposals to reform, and each and every proposal that was submitted by Germany increases the number of African representation in the Security Council. So for us, it's a very, very, very important issue.
But I think but we could get into that sometimes later, the Security Council, because questions are being raised. There are also conflict areas in Europe, and the efficiency of the Security Council is being wanting in other parts of the world. But today, here you are, and welcome, Karibu.
Asante.
Then you have this, what you're calling Rangi za Urafiki. Can you say that?
Yeah, Rangi za Urafiki.
Za Urafiki. You want to talk to us more about that?
Yes, of course. So we had the idea to make a month. Actually, it's a little bit more of a month to celebrate the diversity of the Kenyan-German friendship. And in this regard, more on a people-to-people level than on the purely political level, meaning putting a number of events that we have in the next 4 to 6 weeks under one logo, under one umbrella, and invite also the Kenyan public to some of them. And just show the depth and the diversity, be it culture, be it economic, be it science and research, be it sport, to also make public what we do. And it is a lot that we can show about, and it's very important also to invest in these people-to-people contacts. That was the idea.
If we look at some of the other things that have happened, the current administration, the current Kenyan administration, spent some time in Europe, and Germany was one of those countries, especially when it looked at the exchange work program.
Yes.
And to then open up opportunities whereby Germany said, well, we have a dwindling workforce for folks in the middle belt age, whereby we needed folks to come in and take up positions. That's a need. Yes?
Yes.
And Kenya was in the position whereby, we've got people who are looking for work. There's an unemployment issue here, but we can exchange. And there was an agreement, a partnership that was put in place. How are things going with that currently?
Yeah, so that's exactly when I was talking about the complementarity of our interests to a certain extent, that this field developed very strongly in the last 2 years. In fact, we had a visit of our former Chancellor Scholz here in Kenya, and I think he was so much impressed by the quality of his interlocutors, of the people, of the energy of the young generation, that he agreed with President Ruto to task the embassy and our administration in Berlin and here in Nairobi to negotiate labor mobility agreement, which we did in record time. And as the first country in sub-Sahara Africa, it was signed. In fact, 1 year ago in Berlin. We are progressing on the number of fields. So we see the numbers going up. We had in the first half of 25 approximately 2,000 visa given out for research, work, study, also to look for work. So meaning that you don't have to have a contract in your pocket, but you can go to Germany and have the opportunity, if you have certain qualifications, to work, to look for a job for 12 months. And we, for example, have an increase of nurses from a low level, from 50 but to 150 in 1 year, which is three times as much, due to a very good partnership between Mount Kenya University and a University for Applied Sciences in Germany. So I think we are moving absolutely in the right direction. It's not the super big bang, but I think also our administration, our procedures would not be ready to digest really thousands and thousands and thousands every month. So what we do now is an organic increase. And the feedback that we get so far also from Germany is very, very positive.
The language is a barrier for a lot of people because there is a requirement that at the very basic level, C1, I believe it is, German must be spoken. How would that be countered in terms of folks who, wouldn't be able to say Guten Morgen?
Well, in fact, that changed a bit. So we are not as severe on the language question as we have been before. So in our new immigration law, it's a little bit modeled after the Canadian approach, where you can gain points, for certain qualifications, or for your language, or for other qualifications, for a special profession that we desperately look for in Germany. But the language is only one element, and you can even gain enough points without the language skills. And I can assure you, just coming from Berlin, you hear a lot of English in the streets. There are restaurants where you order in English. But of course, there are jobs like nurses or caretakers or, service industries where you interact a lot with people. You just have to have a basic knowledge of German. But we are also working on this. So the numbers of tests of the Goethe Institute increased also threefold. The demand is very high. We wish also to increase the language courses, but we have just a restriction in space and also in teachers. But we are also in talks with Nairobi University and Kenyatta University to increase the number of Kenyan German teachers that are learning their skills in Kenyan universities. So that's something that we do try now, right now. Yeah.
Well, and still staying with what you'd call labor exchange programs, we find ourselves in a situation whereby a lot of the labor skills that we export or people come to settle in Germany is a low-level kind of skills. So Kenyans are beginning to wonder, is there an opportunity moving forward progressively, whereby as a higher level skilled person, could it be an engineer, could it be beyond a teacher, could be a lecturer, where one would be able to go and be easily assimilated in the German system. And that will have to be built from the academic system so that our local qualifications are able to match with your industry demands in terms of job placements and criteria. So is there an input or rather a requirement or recommendations that German would have for the Kenyan system so that we're able to empower people when they come to German? They just don't have to be the lower skilled tier, but they can also assimilate into other industries. Is there any plans for that?
We don't have a restriction on the qualification, neither on the higher end nor on the lower end.
Right.
But I think from the sort of matchmaking between Kenya and Germany, I would rather say it's the middle skill section. So meaning what we call in German the Facharbeiter, the skilled worker. Somebody probably who did a TVET training here in Kenya. And that's something where we support a lot. So this is one of our main pillars in development cooperation. It is very important also to the Kenyan government. We had the first phase where we equipped 7 centers of excellence in Tibet institutions, mainly in and around Nairobi. And we are moving now into the second phase where we are supporting approximately 80 Tibets all over Kenya. So in each country, there is a Tibet institute that partners with Germany, that gets equipment from Germany, curriculum from Germany, and also mentoring from Germany. So there are partnerships between Tibets in Kenya and Tibets in Germany. And we have made very, very good experiences with Tibet in Germany, but also with the Tibet support here in Kenya. And we are trying also to bring German teachers now to the Tibet institution, so that both things, the qualification in, let's say, automotive engineering, whatever, and a little bit of German is taught at the same time. And I think if we develop this model in the next years, we really will have a pool of middle qualification, I would say. People, skilled workers that can go to Germany. And in Germany, we have a very open system, meaning that whenever you have entered the job market and you are working in a company, there's a lot of opportunities to qualify yourself on the job further. You can go to evening university, or you can do in-house vocational training in your company. So I think the sky is the limit. Everything is possible in this regard.
And in that syllabus where you have the TVETs trying to collaborate, is it expected that people who will be in that program, the graduates, if you get a diploma, let's say, from a Kenyan TVET, and you're in that German-Kenyan collaborator program, that diploma will be credited as well? Should you find a job in German? Is that the expectation?
This is the expectation, and that's why the Chamber of Commerce plays a very important role here in Kenya, because the chambers of commerce are, for the bulk of the jobs, are the responsible institutions to acknowledge a certain degree of qualifications. And but this is an important point, because with our new policy in Germany, we are now becoming more and more aware that this system of recognition of foreign qualifications is by far too complicated. We have I don't know exactly the number, but a number of institutions in Germany that are responsible for this. And it's also depending on the field of work. For example, in the health sector, it is the county level in Germany. For some of the professions, it is the Chamber of Commerce. For others, it is a centralized institution that makes it for all over Germany. But this is something that we work on right now. And here in in Kenya, our partner is the Chamber of Commerce. We already scrutinized also some of the curricula of the Kenyan TVETs. And the higher the degree of overlap in content is, the easier, of course, is the recognition. But we also made the experience that the Kenyan students, normally they get an on-the-job training, a second on-the-job training in Germany.
On the development front, there's a lot that's going on in terms of, continuing to support certain kinds of infrastructure development, and at the very least to see that, that partnership is not just, on one side taking in, but actually to then develop towards some of the things that you're speaking about. What are some of the things that we are seeing, and where have those reached? A couple of years ago, of course, there was, the coming in of, certain projects happening in Kiambu and, Kiambu County, and then also parts of Nairobi. Tell us about that progress.
So we have 3 main pillars in our development cooperation. We negotiate this every 2 years with the Kenyan government, and the last negotiation took place last year in November, mainly with Treasury, but with all the line ministries involved as well. And the 3 pillars are agriculture, with a focus on job creation, sustainability. The second is climate and energy. And the third is youth and employment, where we do the TVET thing. We have a fourth one that increased during the last period, that is governance. This is a cross-cutting issue, and because there are some challenges in the country, and we want to address this. And it's not only German money, it's also European Union money that is invested in this regard and implemented by GIZ. So I would, if you allow, mention firstly the climate and energy projects, because for us, Kenya really is a model case with 94% green energy in the electricity basket. And our strategic thinking is, when we can show the world, also with German support, that it is possible to have an economic development and be sustainable at the same time, we have won the game somehow, because it is seen as a trade-off in many discussions. Either you do the development thing, or you are clean.
Yes.
But I think Kenya really has the chance to do both. Yeah. And that's why we are heavily invested, be it in the geothermal development in Olkaria and other places, be it in solar, in the grid extension, stabilizing the grid, but also in tech cooperation, in green hydrogen, and e-mobility. So this is very important for us. Okay. And for Kenya as well, of course.
Yeah.
And talking of development, you look at other African countries like South Africa, for example. I think there's a more advanced relationship between Germany and South Africa, in the manner of speaking, in terms of industry. There's the assembly and production of vehicles, the Volkswagen, the Mercedes, the German machines, basically speaking. And in Kenya, we are big consumers of that as well. But again, we're just on the consumption end. We are not really involved in the cycle of production. How do you see, what would we need to do in terms of developing that angle? Because we talk of sustainability, and these programs are good. From energy, from agriculture, governance sets the policy. But if you're not really going industrial, which gave birth to the new German, the new economy of German, Kenya may not really liberate itself. So it's not just about the motor industry, but looking at the whole industry. What do you feel would be a starting point for us, Kenya, with German or globally speaking, to start delving into the industrialization and production?
That's a very valid question, and I think it's also important for the Kenyan government. You have the Vision 2030, I think, where the aim is to increase the part of value addition in the economy to, 20%. As far as I remember, now it is between 8 and 10%, and it's not growing, it's relatively steady. I think it's very much depends on the investment conditions, also on the openness of the economy. For the German companies, for example, when they come, and we have about 120 in town or in the country, they first open a relatively small office for after sales and services. But then if they see that the market develops, they open a warehouse, and they open a distribution line. And the third step then is that they open an own production line here. And we see this also in some sectors. And I give you two examples. One, they are both in the automotive industry. For example, the Actros truck from Mercedes-Benz is now, there's a big assembly plant in Thika. And it was opened 2.5 years ago. And I think they're doing quite well. And there are also plans by another big German car maker, you mentioned the name, to also increase its production facilities in order to open an assembly line in Thika. So the components will come from South Africa and from Europe, and will be sort of married in Thika. So and there we see some progress. Honestly, I think, and we are in talks about this with the government, there are some challenges on the regulatory level. There's also the taxman who is getting more and more severe for good reasons, but it's making things not easier for outside investors. There is also an issue with corruption. There's an issue with red tape. But still, the logistic function of Kenya opening the market to the East African community is a very, very strong argument. Now you have 400-something million consumers in this area and a growing middle class, and there are a lot of German products that these people are looking for. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Geopolitics is also playing a role. So if the conditions are ripe, I don't see any hindrance for foreign investment coming in big in Kenya.
And look here, now there's the other regular Kenyan who is a business person.
Yeah,
Maybe
true.
Grows some chives or basil or avocado or macadamia, whatever it may be. And they're thinking, Germany is a market I would like to tap into.
Yeah.
Not necessarily coming out as a government trader.
Yeah.
Are there opportunities for direct, of course, within regulation and control of products, because we're talking about food consumption?
Yeah.
Are there opportunities, and where does one go? Is it to the German ambassador's website? Where does one go to seek information on regulations and opportunities that one can tap to for trade?
Yeah. There are several venues. There's the Chamber of Commerce, as I said, is not only responsible for German companies coming to Kenya, but also the other direction. You have also Kenyan institutions like Ken Invest, but also export promotion bodies. And generally, I would say the opportunities are quite big. As I said, I just come from Germany, and I saw Kenyan avocados in the German supermarkets, for example. That was not the case 4, 5, 6 years ago. That's a new development. You mentioned nuts. So I think the overall sector of agriculture has a lot of potential because the quality of the Kenyan products is outstanding, and the market is open. So we signed an economic partnership agreement between Kenya and the European Union. It's not the German regulations in this regard, it's the European level that is responsible for trade. So basically we are open. We see it in the flower business, for example. 90% of the roses in the German market are coming from Kenya. So there is a lot of opportunities. I think one question that you should ask yourself, or Kenya should ask yourself, is how can you get the first or second level of value addition also here to this country, and not export the tea leaves, but the tea bags. Not export the unroasted, unsalted macadamia, but the finely packed and spicy and good stuff macadamias.
That's
because
the
then the margin will be much, much higher, and the value addition will bring a lot of jobs also to Kenya.
Isn't that when we really start to play at that point? Because until you have value added,
True.
you're not really in the game.
True.
You're not in the game. We can call it whatever you want. But if you're taking your raw product and you are, selling it on the international market, no matter how sweet your partnership is with another country, Kenya, Germany, it doesn't matter how sweet it is, that if there's no value add, if there's no surplus being achieved, then you're not even a player.
Yeah, I totally
I'm sorry.
agree. Totally
is that
agree.
not the case?
Yeah, I totally agree. And we don't hold back any capital or knowledge. I think we would be ready also to invest here in Kenya. But I think also some segments of some of the markets are just controlled and not open enough for foreign engagement, but the opportunities are limitless. And I think that will be the next stage also of economic development in Africa, to at least have the first 1 or 2 steps, of value addition in the country or on the continent, and then go for export.
So let's zoom out on this conversation.
Yeah.
We've had a conversation between Germany and Kenya, and then Germany and the rest of the African continent.
Yeah.
Perhaps we go into that now, because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That until and unless African countries are actually making a profit and are industrialized, like I said, there's no table.
Yeah.
We can say, give us a position at the table.
Yeah.
But until you're at the place where the other countries, Germany, France, take your pick in the European Union, the United States, China, until you're having a conversation where truly people are buying your products that you have industrialized in your country, we're not at the table.
I totally agree, but I also would say there is some homework to do on this continent. I mean, given that you're working on the free trade area, continental-wide free trade area, I think this is a very, very important step forward, and Germany is supporting this by many, many means. But you have a market of 1.4 billion people going to 2 billion in the next 20, 30 years. You have growing middle class. You have a tech-savvy young generation that wants to use the latest gadgets. And you said it's yourself, you have a very entrepreneurial spirit also in Kenya. So I would say all the ingredients are there. But that needs also a little bit of cooperation between the African countries. So for me, it's still not understandable why for many of the flights on the continent you have to go through Paris or Brussels or Frankfurt.
Don't even get me started, Balozi, because we could be here for days.
I don't understand this. And then you have also infrastructure issues, of course. That needs a lot of capital, I agree. But I think if Africa would work on lowering the transaction costs of economic transaction and bringing the markets together also and supply and demand together, it would bring a big, big boost for the continent.
So should the partnerships that we speak about between nations, because look, let's be honest, still, even with the resources that Africa has, Africa is still, in the colonial era, it was, come, resources are extracted, they're taken, the people are changed. Yes. People are changed. Cultures are almost, extinguished during colonialism. But then today, we are seeing a different face of it, whereby Africa is still the pretty girl who's being wooed, but in a softer way. But if we're talking about partnerships, should we not really be looking at partnerships that entrench the very thing that you're talking about? That the cocoa in Ghana shouldn't leave Ghana until it's in a chocolate bar. It shouldn't leave Ghana until it is in drinking chocolate. The vanilla from Madagascar should not leave in pods. That it should leave when it's in oil. It should leave when it's in creams, when it's in essence. That we are talking about tea in Kenya should not leave Kenya until it is in the bags, like you say, in the different varieties. Coffee should not leave, until it's avocado should be able to feed its people. We should be talking about the fruits and actually being made into. I mean, we could go on forever. Ghana said it was going to close its doors to the world in terms of its cocoa leaving. But then what do we see? It doesn't have the infrastructure to then be able to produce on a global scale. So when we talk about partnerships, it's not about selling the cocoa in Belgium, for example. It should be about partnering to ensure that the infrastructure in country exists in order for us to have a conversation on the global scale. Because what I see about these partnerships doing is that it entrenches a lackadaisical, mediocre approach to how we are going to do development. It makes me comfortable because I'll say, okay, my people will go and work in Berlin. They'll buy my avocado. But it doesn't take me up the development rung in any way whatsoever.
No, I couldn't agree more, but if I'm the journalist now and I ask you, do you see any African responsibility also in this?
I see 97% African responsibility, and this is what I'm talking about. I see 97% African responsibility, because how can we sit here and say that the very best that we can do is that you buy our avocado? Absolutely not.
And I would chime in and say, as she says, the imbalance that develops from this collaboration gives a shorthand to the African continent, because the take home for could be the European Union versus any African country. The take home is shorthanded for the African continent or the country, because, as you say, we export raw materials, but the value addition doesn't happen here. So industrialization is not going to generate any economic activity locally, because it's not happening locally. But then Germany has to take advantage, because it's a country, you're growing, you have needs, you have interests, you need to advance. And as she says, Africa is the next frontier for all players in the world. And that's why you see there's a rollout of development, but what we pay for that development is highly imbalanced. So And perhaps this is not a question, it's just a conversation, because the responsibility bears with us as the African continent to set the terms so that there is mutual benefit at the end of the day, not at the beginning, you know, because there's a policy, the conversations, they happen very well and they are rolled out. But then we have to take responsibility, because you realize, you mentioned about the unpredictability of the tax regime, especially in Kenya, which inhibits now investment at the second or third level of industrialization, assembly of various industries. So that is our responsibility, and we are woke to that. 60 years into independence, Africa is changing, Africa is rising. There is a whole new breed of a generation that is now standing up and says our motherland need not be exploited anymore. Let's meet at the playing arena whereby we give and take. Because again, we understand we cannot develop in isolation. We give and take. It's a global village. So when we see Germany stepping up, at least beginning to take the lead, I can tell you comfortably, we are beginning to forget the scramble and partition of Africa, you know, the conference. Because that lingers a lot in the African memory. But we are beginning to embrace, because I can even see somebody saying, one of our viewers, they are beneficiary of the GIZ collaboration. And these are nuances of win-win situations. Hopefully we can roll them out better. And maybe next time, next decade, maybe, but hopefully in our lifetime, in the next 2-3 decades, we'll have more of people coming from Germany or the European Union, not just to enjoy, but also to appreciate in terms of value, in terms of existence, and therein have a very ecosystem that will build both ways, so that we don't feel short-handed at the end of the day. Yeah, that's what I'm living for.
I totally agree. Yeah.
You mentioned the role of the African Union. I have my reservations about the role that it plays, but it would be interesting to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to link it to a story, because now, like I said, we've zoomed out and we're looking at the continent. You know, this last week, Dangote Refinery sent its first batch of refined crude, and it was bought by the US. Right? In the 80s, Nigeria managed to decimate its refineries, and due to corruption and mismanagement, the things just did not work. 25-30 years later, Dangote single-handedly, of course, with as a businessman, with funds from different operatives, then was able to set up a refinery in Nigeria and has now sent out its first batch. That means, number one, it's acceptable at that standard, but that it's done in Nigeria. That is happening. And I want to link it to what you said, that why do I have to fly to Dubai or to and then go to be able to go to Morocco, as I have done, and I don't understand why it will take me 26 hours to leave the continent to come back. So these are some of the conversations that we're having. Production of crude, which is our resource, can be done. We've seen it. It has happened. But then why do I have to spend $400 to fly from Nairobi to Kampala? Why do I have to go to Dubai sometimes to get to Abuja? Why do I have to spend more to fly to South Africa than it does to take me to fly to Dubai from Nairobi? Why do we have to do that? But you mentioned that hopefully this will be the time that we see the African Union playing a role in some of this coordination and cooperation amongst African countries. Can the African Union, according to you, actually operate in this manner if it is funded by external parties?
Well, I would like to give this question back to you again. I'm not here to judge, what the continent is doing and the African Union is doing. But of course, for the political power of an institution, it is very important to be on a stable financial footing. It's also understandable that some of the African countries just don't have the means to pay their contributions, and that is a difficulty for them. But given, as you said, that the biggest chunk of the budget is financed by international partners, of course, does not make the institution as such stronger. I think there is another issue here. That is about sovereignty. Regional institutions are machines to pool national sovereignty. That's what we are doing in the European Union. So we have given up a lot of our national sovereignty from Berlin to Brussels. Why? Because we think that a number of issues are better dealt with on a supranational level, be it trade, for example. In Africa, and I think you do this transfer of sovereignty if you are sure about your sovereignty. I think that in Africa, due to the relatively late state-building process, due to colonialism, this question of sovereignty is still very, very important for the country. So it's all the more it is harder for them to transfer sovereignty to a supranational level. This is my own theory or my own assumption. I don't know if it is true, but I think it explains probably here and there a little bit of the difficulties and challenges that the African Union has to impose itself and to make also his or her voice heard. But I think, we are talking about 2 decades of African Union. Before it was the Organization of African Unity. And if you look in the history, 2 decades is not a long time. And in this regard, I would not be too pessimistic. And in fact, I would be rather optimistic that the African Union now will be at the table of the G20 meetings. So we are getting a G21. And it was also Germany that pushed for it very hard, because we think it's important to have this continental voice also at this table.
Indeed.
And they're developing opinions about these whole international organizations, G20, NATO, because we also see how the leaders of the African Union or the African president, the kind of even time they get to present their agenda. There are a lot that is to be desired.
Yeah.
We hope these platforms can develop to ably allow people to converge and have a conversation that is a win-win conversation. But as we come to the tail end, you still have a few days, a few weeks to Rangi's out of
Yes. It starts this Sunday in Eldoret. You know, we have the Berlin Marathon in this weekend.
Yeah.
And we are partnering with some partners on the ground that are active in sports and in charity, and we will have a big pupils competition in running on Saturday, and then a public watch party on Sunday. We did this already 2 years ago, and it was a big success. At this time, Eliud Kipchoge won for the 5th time. I think he's not participating this time around, but seeing what the Kenyan athletes are achieving in Tokyo right now, I'm very optimistic that you guys play a very important role in Berlin again this year.
Indeed. It's a good conversation, and I'm glad that we can have it. Necessary for us to embrace our wokeness. Yeah. And it's obviously also from this that a lot of work needs to be done. But the partnership and the development that comes from it, of course, is one that can't be ignored. His Excellency Sebastian Groth is the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Kenya. Has been our guest this hour. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with us on the Situation Room.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much. 2 minutes past 8. Good morning.
The latest news from around the world. 94.4. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We are turning